The Apache hunter almost walked past the body in the canyon, because in that country, in those years, a body was not a rare thing, and a wise man did not go looking into other people's deaths. His name was Ahiga. He was tracking a deer down a dry wash at first light when he saw the shape crumpled against the red rock, half in shadow, and his first thought was that it was already too late for whatever it had been. Then the shape moved. One hand, just the fingers, opening and closing in the dust, the way a person reaches for something when they are too far gone to know they are reaching. Ahiga should have kept walking. Every hard lesson of his life told him to keep walking. The body was a woman, and not an Apache woman. He could see that at once, from the work of her dress and the pattern of the beads. She was Lakota, one of the displaced northern people the soldiers had been driving into this borderland country. Strangers, another tribe entirely, no kin and no concern of his. And a man who carried a strange woman home in those years, carried trouble home with her. Ahiga knelt by her anyway. He was not, in the end, a man who could walk past a hand reaching in the dust. The woman was barely alive. She had a deep wound in her side, days old and gone bad, and she had crawled, by the look of the long scrape behind her, a terrible distance to reach the shade and the seep of water at the canyon bottom. Her lips were cracked to bleeding. Her eyes opened a slit when Ahiga touched her, and there was no fear left in them, only a question, which was the simplest question there is. Will you help me, or will you be one more thing that hurts? I will not hurt you, Ahiga said, knowing she could not understand the Apache words, saying them for the tone. I have no idea what to do with you. You are not my people, and you will bring me grief I cannot afford. But I am not going to leave you in this wash. Hold on. I am going to lift you, and it is going to hurt, and then I am going to take you somewhere with a roof. Remember that hand in the dust. Ahiga only meant to do the one decent thing a man cannot walk past. He did not know that lifting a wounded Lakota woman out of that canyon would set two grieving peoples on the road to war, and that the same woman, in the end, would be the only thing that could pull them back from it. That is the whole of this story. It begins with a hand reaching in the dust, and a hunter who knelt. To understand the body in the canyon, you have to understand the years, because those years drove peoples 1,000 miles from their homes, and dropped them, broken and starving, onto land that was not theirs, and not empty. The woman's name was Wachiwi. She was Lakota, of the far northern plains, and she had come to that southern borderland the way thousands came in those years, not by choice, but at the point of a bayonet. The soldiers had broken her band, the way they broke so many, and marched the survivors south to land the government had picked for them. Dry, hard land, where the old skills did not work, and the rations did not come, and people died of hunger and heartbreak in equal measure. Wachiwi had run. When a smaller band split off from the agency to try to survive on their own in the canyons, Wachiwi had gone with them, because she would rather die free in strange country than slow in a government pen. And dying free in strange country was very nearly exactly what happened. A patrol had found their little camp. In the scatter and the shooting, Wachiwi took a soldier's bullet through the side, and she crawled away into the canyon country, and kept crawling, alone, for 3 days, until a hand in the dust was all the life she had left. That was the woman Ahiga found, not a stranger sent to trouble him. A woman driven off the edge of the world by the same forces that were squeezing his own Apache people smaller every year. They did not share a language, or a tribe, or a single ancestor, but they shared an enemy, and they shared a grief, and Ahiga, carrying her up out of that canyon, did not yet know how much. Ahiga lived apart from the main Apache camp, alone in a brush lodge up a side canyon, because he was a hunter and a quiet man, and had buried his own wife 2 seasons back, and had not wanted company since. That solitude was the only reason he could take Wachiwi in at all. There was no one up that side canyon to see, and no one to forbid it. The first days, Ahiga did not know if Wachiwi would live. The wound in her side had gone bad, and bringing it back was slow, ugly work. Ahiga drew the poison the way his people knew how, with heat and poultice, and a patience that does not rush a body. He spooned water, and then broth between her cracked lips, a little at a time, through fever after fever. He did not sleep much those first nights. He told himself it was only that a man does not start a thing and leave it half done. That was a lie he found easier than the truth, which was that, somewhere in those nights of keeping a stranger alive, the loneliness he had carried for 2 seasons had quietly found something to do. Wachiwi came back slowly. The fever broke on the 4th day, and she woke clear-eyed in a stranger's lodge with no idea whose it was, and the old fear jumped into her face. Ahiga did the only thing he knew. He set food within her reach, and he moved back, and he sat down with his hands open and empty, where she could see them. It is a thing that crosses every border. Open and empty hands. Wachiwi looked at them a long while. Then she ate. There was a night in that first hard week that Ahiga never spoke of to anyone, but never forgot. Wachiwi's fever climbed so high near midnight that she began to speak, fast and broken, in her own Lakota tongue, to people who were not there. Ahiga could not understand a word of it, but he did not need the words. He had heard that kind of talking before, at his own wife's deathbed. It was a person walking back through their whole life because they thought they were leaving it. So Ahiga did the only thing he could. He held Wachiwi's hot hand in both of his, and he talked back to her, low and steady in Apache. Nonsense, anything. The names of the canyons and the deer trails and the stars, so that whatever far place her fever had taken her to, there would be one voice anchoring her to the living world. Near dawn, the fever broke. Wachiwi never knew he had done it. Ahiga never told her, but he had decided, somewhere in that long night of talking a stranger back from the edge, that he was not going to let this one go the way he had lost the last one. They had no shared words. So they built them, slow, over the weeks of her healing, his few scraps of the trade tongue and her fewer, and a great deal of pointing and watching. Wachiwi learned that the quiet hunter was named Ahiga, and that he was gentle with the deer he killed, and gentler with her wound, and that he hummed low under his breath when he worked, and did not know he did it. Ahiga learned that Wachiwi, even half dead, even among strangers, had a spine of iron, that she insisted on sitting up before her body was ready, on helping before she could stand, on owing him as little as a person can owe, the one who saved their life. He found he respected that more than gratitude. Gratitude is easy. Pride that refuses to curdle into helplessness is rare. The turn came, the way it comes, not in a grand moment, but in a small one neither of them planned. Wachiwi was strong enough by then to walk a little, and one evening she walked out to the lip of the side canyon, to watch the sun go down over country that was not her own, and Ahiga found her there, with her arms wrapped around herself, looking north, and he understood, without a word, that she was looking toward a home 1,000 miles away, that she would likely never see again. He had stood exactly like that himself, after his wife died, looking at a horizon that held everything he had lost. Ahiga did not say anything wise, because there was nothing wise to say. He simply came and stood beside her, close, and looked north with her, so that she was not looking at it alone. And Wachiwi, after a moment, leaned, just slightly, so that her shoulder rested against his arm, and Ahiga did not move away, and the two of them watched the sun go down over the lost country together. That was the turn, not a word. Two people who had each lost their world, standing close enough to share the weight of looking at it. Ahiga had spent 2 seasons believing the loneliness after his wife's death was simply the shape of the rest of his life, a thing to be endured and not cured. Wachiwi had spent a year believing she had nothing left to lose, and therefore nothing left to fear, standing shoulder to shoulder on the lip of that canyon, looking north at everything they had each lost. The two of them found the one thing neither had expected to find again, which was a reason to look forward instead of back. After that evening, The careful distance in the brush lodge was gone, and something warmer stood in its place, and neither of them pretended otherwise. "I cannot give you back the North," Ahiga told her one night, in their rough, patched-together speech. "I cannot give you back your people, or your river, or your dead. I know that. I would not insult you by trying. But I can give you a place where no one drives you, and a fire that is yours, and a man who will look north with you every evening you want to, for as long as you want to. It is not your home, Wachiwi. I know it. But it could be a home, if you would have it." Wachiwi was quiet a long while. Then she took Ahiga's hand, the hand that had reached into the dust of the canyon, and lifted her out, and she held it, and that was her answer, and it was enough. Here is the cruel thing about that country in those years. A good deed could not stay a private matter. The world was too tense, too crowded with grief and suspicion, and the saving of one Lakota woman by one Apache hunter did not stay up that quiet side canyon. It got out, and when it got out, it landed in the worst possible place, on the worst possible nerves, and it started a war. It began with the displaced Lakota, Wachiwi's own people. The small free band she had run with had not all died in the patrol's attack. Some had survived, and scattered, and slowly regathered in the canyons, and they had counted Wachiwi among the dead. So when word reached them, traded camp to camp, that a Lakota woman was living in an Apache lodge, it did not reach them as a love story. It reached them as a theft. The Apache had taken one of theirs. In a year, when everything was being taken from them, the Lakota survivors heard that an Apache had taken their woman, and grief, that has nowhere to go, turns very fast into rage. And the Apache band, Ahiga's people, heard their own twisted version, that a strange northern woman had bewitched one of their hunters, and that her vengeful people were now massing in the canyons to attack. Two grieving, frightened, cornered peoples, each already half mad with everything the soldiers had done to them, now had a reason to turn that madness on each other. That is the thing about people who have had everything taken from them. The rage has to go somewhere. It cannot reach the soldiers, who are too many and too well armed. So it builds and builds with nowhere to go, and then someone hands it a target close enough to strike, and it goes off like powder. The Lakota survivors had their target now, the Apache who took our woman. The Apache had theirs, the northern strangers massing to attack us. Neither target was real. Both felt absolutely real to people aching for somewhere to put 2 years of grief. Young men on both sides began to talk of blood. A war that should never have existed, between two peoples who had no quarrel, and should have been allies against the only real enemy either of them had, came up out of the ground like a grass fire, and the spark of it was one act of mercy in a canyon. Ahiga saw what was happening before most, because he was the still point at the center of it, and he was sick at heart over it. "I saved one life," Ahiga said to Wachiwi, the night the talk of war reached even their quiet canyon. "One, I pulled one woman out of a wash because I could not walk past her hand in the dust. And now young men on both sides are sharpening knives over it. Men who have lost everything to the bluecoats and have finally found someone close enough to bleed. It is madness, Wachiwi. We are not enemies, your people and mine. We are the same people, broken the same way, by the same hand. And they are going to kill each other over us." Wachiwi did not answer right away. She was a chief's campwoman among the Lakota before the breaking, and she knew how these fires spread, and how rarely they were put out before they had burned through a generation. She knew that the easiest thing, the thing that would cost her the least, was to stay quiet, up the canyon, with the man she had come to love, and let the two bands tear at each other far away. She also knew she would not be able to live with herself if she did. "You pulled me out of the dust," Wachiwi said at last. "Now I have to do the harder thing you started. I have to walk back into it. Both camps believe a lie about us, Ahiga. A lie cannot be killed by hiding from it. It can only be killed by the truth standing up in front of everyone, in the open, where they have to look at it. So that is what I am going to do. I am going to stand up in front of both peoples, my own and yours, and let them look at the truth of us, and dare them to make war over a woman who was saved, and a man who saved her. It took Ahiga and Wachiwi most of a week to arrange it, and it was the most dangerous thing either of them had ever done, because to stop the war, they had to do the one thing the war made deadly. They had to bring the two camps face to face. They sent word, carefully, through the few traders who moved between the canyons, to the Lakota survivors. Your daughter Wachiwi is alive, and she asks her people to meet her, in the open, at the flat ground below the Twin Rocks, in peace, to hear the truth from her own mouth. To the Apache band, come and hear the truth of what your hunter did, and decide it with your eyes instead of your fear. It could have gone wrong 100 ways. Two armed, grieving, suspicious peoples, brought to the same ground, with young men on both sides aching for someone to blame. If a single nervous hand had reached for a single weapon, the flat ground below the Twin Rocks would have become a killing field, and Wachiwi and Ahiga would have been the first to fall. They came anyway. The Lakota came down from the North Canyons, lean and hard and grieving. The Apache came from the south, Ahiga's people, just as wary. And between the two camps, on the open flat, with no weapon in her hands, and her whole body in the line of every drawn bow, stood one woman, Wachiwi, Lakota by blood, healed by Apache hands, in love with the man who had saved her. She stood in the gap between two peoples about to make a war, and she spoke. "Look at me," Wachiwi called out, first in her own Lakota tongue to her people, then waiting while a trader carried it into Apache for the other camp. "Look at me, with your eyes, and not with your grief. I am Wachiwi. My people counted me dead, and I was nearly dead, shot by a soldier's bullet, and left to crawl into a canyon to die alone. No Apache did that to me. A bluecoat did that to me. The same bluecoats who broke your bands, both of yours, and drove you 1,000 miles onto this dying ground." The two camps were silent. Wachiwi went on, and her voice carried across the flat. "An Apache found me dying. He owed me nothing. I was a stranger, another tribe, trouble he did not need, and he carried me out of that wash, and he spent 2 seasons keeping me alive, asking nothing, and somewhere in it, he and I came to love each other. That is the whole crime. That is the entire reason you have come here with bows. A man saved a woman, and the woman lived, and the two of them love. My Lakota people, hear me. The Apache did not steal me. The Apache saved me when my own strength was gone. And my Apache friends, hear me. My people are not massing to attack you. My people are grieving a daughter they thought dead, and grief was lied to and told it was theft. How many of you," Wachiwi called out, "have lost a daughter, a sister, a wife, to the bluecoats? Raise the thought of them in your heart right now. That is who you are really angry at. Not each other. Them. And here you stand, both of you, ready to do for the bluecoats the one thing they could never quite finish, which is to wipe the last of us off this ground. They could not break us with bullets fast enough, so they will be glad to watch us break each other." Wachiwi turned slowly, so that she faced both camps in turn, one woman alone on the open ground. "You want to make a war," Wachiwi said. "I understand the wanting. You have all lost so much that you are full to the throat with rage, and you need somewhere to put it. But you would be making the bluecoats war for them. They could not be more pleased than to watch the Lakota and the Apache spend the last of their strength, killing each other in these canyons. Do not give them that. I am alive. I am loved. No one here is your enemy. Your enemy wears blue and is laughing somewhere to the north. Put the bows down." There was a silence on that flat ground that seemed to last a year, and in it, the whole thing hung on a knife's edge, because a crowd full of grief and weapons can break either way, and no one knew which way this one would break. For a long moment, nobody moved at all, and Wachiwi stood in the center of it, knowing that her own life was the price if she had judged her people wrong. She did not lower her eyes. A woman who lowers her eyes in that moment tells a frightened crowd she is not sure of her own truth, and an unsure truth gets people killed. So Wachiwi stood straight and let them all look at her, Lakota and Apache both, and waited to see what two grieving peoples would choose. It was an old Lakota man who moved first, Wachiwi's own uncle, a man who had thought he had buried the last of his brother's children. He walked out from the Lakota camp, alone, slow, across the open ground, and every bow on the Apache side tensed, and Ahiga's heart stopped in his chest. The old man walked all the way to Wachiwi, and he looked at her living face a long moment, and then he turned and faced the Apache camp, and he raised his empty hands high, so that everyone on both sides could see them empty. "My brother's daughter is alive," the old man called out, his voice cracking, "because one of you would not walk past her. I came here with a knife in my heart for the people who took her. I find instead the people who saved her. I am an old man, and I have buried too many, and I will not bury more over a lie. I lay my war down, here, in front of everyone. I lay it down." And the old man crouched and set his bow on the ground and stood back up with his hands empty. There is a thing that happens when one respected man lays his weapon down in front of everyone. It gives every frightened young man behind him permission to do the thing he was secretly desperate to do, which was not to die that day. One Apache elder stepped out and laid his bow beside the old Lakota's, then a young Lakota, then more and more, from both camps, until the flat ground below the twin rocks was scattered with laid-down weapons, and the war that one act of mercy had started was ended, on the same ground, by the woman that mercy had saved. The two bands did not become one. They were too different, too far from their separate homes, each carrying its own grief in its own tongue. But they camped near each other in those canyons, after that day, and they shared what little the dying land gave, and they faced the only real enemy either of them had, as something closer to allies than either had been alone. Wachiwi and Ahiga were married, in the sight of both peoples, with a Lakota uncle and an Apache elder both speaking over them, the first joining of those two distant bloods anyone in either camp had ever seen. The young men who had been so eager for war a week before stood at the edges of the marriage and looked faintly ashamed of themselves, the way the young do when their elders have shown them a better road. "You saved one life in a canyon," Wachiwi said to Ahiga on the night they were married, "and it nearly cost 100. And then it saved more than 100, because two peoples who were about to bleed each other are camped side by side tonight instead. I do not think you knew, when you knelt by my hand in the dust, that you were doing all of that." "I did not know anything," Ahiga said. "I only knew I could not walk past you. I am still not a man who knows much, Wachiwi, but I know I would kneel by that hand again, every morning of my life, knowing everything it would cost, because everything it cost led to you." Wachiwi did not answer that with words. She took Ahiga's hand, the one that had reached into the dust, and she pressed it flat against her own heart, and then against his, the way her people sealed a thing that words were too small to hold. Two hands, two hearts, one fire, in a borderland that had tried to kill them both. It was enough. It was, Ahiga thought, more than a broken man had any right to ask of a hard world. Ahiga and Wachiwi grew old in that borderland country, and it was never the green north Wachiwi had lost. But Ahiga kept his promise, and every evening that she wanted to, the two of them walked to the lip of the canyon and looked north together, so that she never had to look at the lost country alone. They raised children who spoke two tongues and carried two people's blood, and those children grew up in a place where Lakota and Apache, who had nearly made war in the canyons, instead shared fires and stories, and the long, hard work of surviving years that were trying to erase them both. There was a hard winter, A few years on, when the Apache band's hunting failed and the children grew thin, and it was the Lakota camp that shared its dried meat, unasked, because Wachiwi's uncle remembered who had saved his brother's daughter, and said a debt like that is never finished, only carried forward. And there was a sickness season after that, when the Lakota had no one who knew the desert medicines, and it was Ahiga's people who came and tended them. Back and forth it went, year on year, two peoples who had nearly killed each other, learning instead to keep each other alive, until the young ones could not remember a time the two camps had not been kin. The peace that Wachiwi made on the flat ground below the twin rocks held, not because anyone signed anything, but because everyone who had been there remembered the sight of one woman standing alone in the gap, daring two grieving peoples to choose the Bluecoats' war over their own survival, and choosing, instead, to live. The old Lakota uncle, who had laid down his bow, first came to every birth and every naming, and he told the children, over and over, the story of the day their mother stood between two camps, with no weapon, and ended a war with the truth. And Ahiga, when he was very old, would add the only part he ever claimed for himself, which was the smallest part, and the part the whole thing turned on. I found her hand in the dust, Ahiga would say. That is all I did. I knelt down by a hand reaching in the dust, when every wise thing in me said, walk on. Be glad I am not always a wise man. The unwise thing I did that morning is the reason all of you are here. It started with a body in a canyon, and a war that should never have been. It ended with two broken peoples camped side by side, and a marriage of two bloods that had never met, and all of it grew out of one hunter who could not walk past a hand reaching in the dust. If you stayed with Ahiga and Wachiwi all the way to the end of this story, then you already belong at this fire. Another one is lit, and another story is waiting. Stay close. These canyons are full of them.